You are staring into absolute, crushing darkness. Slowly, the twin halogen beams of a remote-operated vehicle sweep across the abyss, illuminating a massive, perfectly sheared stone terrace resting exactly 82 feet underwater. The visual shock is instantaneous. It looks exactly like a colossal stepped pyramid, rising with mathematical precision in a submerged wasteland where no human lung could have drawn a breath for the last 10,000 years. We pour our arrogance into towering skyscrapers of steel and glass, fiercely believing that our footprints are eternal. But this silent monument lying off the coast of Japan forces a terrifying realization. Everything you know about human permanence is a comforting, fragile illusion. The Earth does not care about our empires. It can swallow entire paradigms of history overnight, drowning our greatest achievements and leaving nothing behind but cold, silent stone in the dark. By gazing through the terrifying lens of geological deep time, we are going to peel back the comforting lie of our own supremacy. We will descend into the crushing pressure of the Pacific to read the ancient violent scars of the Earth itself. What we find down there will not just challenge our history books. It will grant you a poetic, devastating understanding of our profoundly precarious, incredibly temporary place within the grand, indifferent, stellar dance of the cosmos. A drone slowly descends through the turbulent, tearing force of the Kuroshio current. The comforting ocean blue rapidly fades into an oppressive, suffocating deep-sea black. And then, out of the eternal gloom, something impossible solidifies in the headlights. Massive, stepped terraces of pale sandstone emerge from the silt. It looks like a sunken acropolis, a temple complex built for forgotten gods, resting in absolute, eternal silence at the bottom of the world. For millennia, this abyss kept its secret hidden beneath the violent waves of the Ryukyu archipelago. It was only torn from the darkness in 1986 by a local diver, searching the freezing, treacherous waters for migrating hammerhead sharks. Instead of marine life, he drifted over an architectural ghost, a monolithic structure looming in the twilight, commanding the seafloor with a presence that instantly shattered the boundaries of conventional archaeology. The sheer scale of the anomaly crushes the mind. The main monument stretches roughly 164 feet long and spreads 65 feet wide across the ocean floor. We are looking at a titanic mass of carved rock, a silent leviathan of geometry that dwarfs the surrounding coral reefs. It stands as a profound echo of intention, a seemingly deliberate carving left in an environment where only chaos and biological decay are supposed to reign supreme. But it is not just the colossal size that haunts the scholars who dare to study it. Resting in the gloom, at a depth of exactly 82 feet, the monument exhibits an eerie, unexplainable orientation. The edges of this massive, sunken monolith are perfectly aligned with the cardinal directions of the compass. North, south, east, and west are etched into its fundamental geometry, a chilling fact that deeply troubles traditional geologists and defies easy explanation. You have to understand the existential weight of that perfection. The natural world rarely operates with the calculated precision of a surveyor's compass. When we see perfectly straight lines running strictly true north in the middle of a chaotic marine trench, our minds immediately scream that someone had to have measured it. Someone had to have carved it. Yet the official narrative demands we accept this as a freak accident, a mere coincidence born of blind planetary mechanics. Investigating this anomaly is a descent into a hostile, alien realm. The water here is fiercely ruled by the Kuroshio current, a massive, relentless oceanic river that sweeps past the Japanese islands with terrifying speed. It is one of the most violent and punishing diving environments on Earth. The currents do not just flow, they rip, they tear, and they aggressively defend this drowned monolith from human eyes, acting as a liquid fortress wall against our curiosity. Every second spent hovering above these stone steps is a battle for survival against the crushing atmospheric pressure and the unpredictable drag of the sea. The darkness here feels heavy, almost conscious, pressing against the glass of the submersible as if trying to push us back to the sunlit world. It is a place of profound, terrifying isolation, where the comforting laws of human civilization hold absolutely no power, and the raw, indifferent energy of the planet dictates everything. We are left staring at an impossible paradox etched in stone. If this perfectly aligned, stepped monolith is a natural formation, then the Earth mimics the geometry of human thought with a precision that borders on the horrific. But if those right angles were truly cut by conscious minds, then we are looking at the remnants of an empire that existed millennia before the first pharaohs even dreamed of raising a pyramid in the sands of Egypt. The accepted timeline of our species tells us that civilization was born in the warm, fertile crescent of the Middle East, safe on dry land. But this submerged ghost demands we look into the abyss and question everything we have been taught. It suggests a forgotten epoch, a time when our ancestors mastered stone and geometry long before the ice caps melted and the oceans rose to wipe their legacy from the face of the globe. As we drift over these silent, drowned terraces, the ultimate question hangs in the freezing current, threatening to unravel the very fabric of our history. We must look beyond the comforting warmth of our modern cities and confront the terrifying dark of the deep. What if the true cradle of human civilization was not a sun-baked desert, but a completely different, ancient world that simply no longer exists? Through the thick acrylic sphere of the submersible, that ancient world finally takes shape. The sonar ping echoes like a slow, dying heartbeat in the freezing cabin. On the glowing monitors, the chaotic noise of the sea floor gives way to cold, undeniable geometry. The digital map renders a three-dimensional model, and there, cutting through the organic mess of the ocean floor, is a corner. A sharp, terrifyingly precise corner. To the marine stratigrapher staring at this screen, that single corner is a physical impossibility. The universe is built on curves, on entropy, on the beautiful, chaotic mess of fractals and organic decay. Nature abhors a straight line. It is the signature of conscious will, of biology asserting dominance over stone. So why, 82 feet beneath the crushing waves, did the blind, uncaring Earth carve a perfect right angle? As the submersible glides closer, the sonar reveals not just one corner, but an entire complex of sharp, 90-degree right angles. Massive terraced platforms emerge from the gloom, ending in sheer, terrifying drops of 20 to 33 feet. The digital rendering spins in the sickly green light of the cabin, displaying a structure that resembles a colossal, submerged ziggurat. It looks exactly like an altar built for forgotten gods. Every sweep of the acoustic laser confirms the nightmare. The angles do not waver. The platforms are terrifyingly flat. To look at these sheer cliffs of stone is to feel a deep evolutionary vertigo. We are hardwired to recognize the work of our own kind, and every instinct screams that this was planned, measured, and cut. But this architecture rests in a lightless void where human lungs would implode in a matter of seconds. The acoustic sensors map another impossible anomaly hiding in the deep-sea shadows. Stratigraphers have identified a specific feature they simply call the arch. It is a narrow, deliberate passageway carved straight through the solid rock. The dimensions are chillingly familiar. It seems perfectly designed for a human to walk through, shoulders brushing the ancient stone, stepping from one immense terrace to the next. The stratigrapher watches the arch render on the screen, and a cold dread settles in the cramped, freezing cockpit. If you were to walk through that gate, where would it lead? The geometry suggests purpose, a ritual pathway built for a procession that has not marched in 10 millennia. The silence of the abyss feels heavier now, loaded with the ghosts of a hypothetical civilization that the ocean swallowed entirely whole. But the horror of Yonaguni is not just in its shape. It is written into the very atomic structure of the stone itself. To understand the killer, we must autopsy the corpse. The submersible's mechanical arm extends into the black water, grinding a core sample from the pristine face of the ziggurat. The drill bites into the ancient material, pulling a cylinder of truth from the heart of the submerged and silent mountain. Laboratory analysis of the rock reveals a timeline that shatters our fragile human ego. This structure is composed of fine sandstones and mudstones belonging to the lower Miocene Yayama group. This sediment was laid down and compressed over 20 million years ago. This rock was born in a primordial ocean, forged in absolute darkness, long before the first primitive hominids ever dared to walk upright on the African savanna. We are trapped between two irreconcilable spans of time. You have a canvas that is 20 million years old, bearing geometric cuts that look like they were made by bronze chisels just yesterday. The marine stratigrapher is forced to confront a terrifying duality. Either an unknown race of master builders found this ancient bedrock and shaped it to their will, or the earth itself is a master sculptor mocking our sense of design. If human hands carved these monumental stairs, they did so with a hubris that is physically painful to witness. They sliced into 20-million-year-old stone, believing their empire would outlast the rock itself. They built their ziggurat, they carved their arch, and they defied the chaotic forces of the world. And then, the oceans rose, the sky darkened, and the water wiped their arrogance from the geological record without a second thought. Yet the alternative is infinitely more terrifying. What if no human ever touched this stone? What if the slow, blind mechanics of tectonic stress, acting over millions of years, can accidentally produce the exact blueprint of a temple? If nature can forge a 90-degree angle and perfectly parallel terraces without a drop of conscious intent, then human architecture is not special. It is just another temporary glitch in the system. The sonar continues its rhythmic, indifferent pinging. The green wireframe model of the ziggurat rotates on the monitor, a ghost trapped in a digital cage. Outside the acrylic glass, the Kuroshio current rips past, an invisible force of pure entropy trying to tear the submersible apart. We sit in our fragile machine, suspended over the abyss, desperately trying to impose meaning on a universe that owes us absolutely nothing. The stone remains silent, keeping its 20-million-year-old secrets locked away under 82 feet of violent water. But this rock was not always drowning in the dark. To understand who, or what, sheared these massive blocks, we have to look past the current water level. We must turn the clock back to a frozen epoch, when the ocean retreated, the skies were gray, and this submerged peak was a towering fortress breathing the cold, open air. You step from the crushing pressure of the Pacific into a freezing, windowless core sample storage room in Tokyo. The air here is thick with the scent of ozone and ancient sediment. To understand the geometry of Yonaguni, we must look past the 20-million-year-old sandstone. We have to strip away the water entirely. On a massive paleoclimate simulation screen, the oceans of the Earth recede like a draining bathtub, exposing the naked, vulnerable crust of a forgotten planet. The archaeoseismologist watches the digital tides fall, their face bathed in the cold blue light of the monitor. This is the ultimate abyss of time. To find the hypothetical builders of our submerged ziggurat, we must travel back to an era when the oceans were literally swallowed by ice. It is a terrifying realization. The world we know, the coastlines we map and defend, are just a temporary illusion. We are merely tenants occupying a landscape that the Earth regularly reshapes. Look at the simulation rendering the Last Glacial Maximum. Exactly 20,000 years ago, the planet was locked in a bitter planetary deep freeze. The water that currently drowns the Yonaguni monument did not exist as liquid. It was trapped in colossal continental ice sheets miles high. Because of this massive planetary theft of water, global sea levels were up to 400 feet lower than they are today. The geography of the world was entirely unrecognizable and alien. The archaeoseismologist pulls a cylindrical core sample from the freezing racks. This tube of packed dirt and microscopic shells is a physical memory of a vanished epoch. It tells us that what is now the abyss was once solid ground. Standing at the base of the Yonaguni monument 20,000 years ago, you would not be swimming in the dark. You would be standing under a vast, open sky, looking up at a towering, jagged plateau of sheer rock, feeling the bite of a freezing wind. The simulation on the screen shifts, mapping the prehistoric topography of East Asia. The deep trenches vanish. The entire Ryukyu arc, including the island of Yonaguni, is no longer a scattered archipelago. It is physically fused to the Asian mainland by a massive, sprawling land bridge. This creates a vast, fertile coastal plain stretching all the way to modern Taiwan. It is a Paleolithic superhighway, a pristine expanse where immense herds of megafauna could freely roam the Earth. This vanished continent is a ghost haunting our modern maps. For thousands of years, this sprawling plain was a thriving ecosystem. If human engineers did carve those 90-degree angles into the bedrock, this was their kingdom. They would have built their society in the shadow of the great sandstone plateau, completely unaware that a planetary time bomb was ticking above their heads. They trusted the permanence of the ground, just as blindly as we trust our own coastlines today. But eternity is an illusion, and the Earth is a merciless landlord. The archaeoseismologist types a command, and the simulation jumps forward in time. The climate shifts. The colossal ice sheets gripping the northern hemisphere begin to destabilize. The temperature of the planet rises, triggering a catastrophic release of trapped water. The ocean does not creep back slowly. It returns with a violent, unstoppable hunger, ready to reclaim the land it had temporarily surrendered. The timeline hits 14,000 years ago. The geological record calls this terrifying event Meltwater Pulse 1A. It is a period of rapid, violent deglaciation. The data from the core samples is indisputable, and it paints a picture of apocalyptic horror. Sea levels did not rise by inches over centuries. They surged upward at a devastating rate of 1.6 to 2 feet per single decade. The ocean was literally swallowing the world alive, drowning coastal habitats globally. The simulation displays the Paleolithic superhighway disappearing beneath the rising blue tide. The raw data maps the doom of any biology living in that fertile basin. Every single generation is forced to retreat further inland, abandoning their hunting grounds and stone monuments. The water relentlessly chases life up the slopes of the continent. To any conscious observer of that era, this is the absolute end of the world. The ocean acts as a hungry deity, erasing their entire existence. The archaeoseismologist traces a finger along the drowning topography on the glass screen. Finally, the relentless tide reaches the high plateau of Yonaguni. The massive stone terraces, whether carved by human desperation or tectonic chance, are swallowed by the dark, freezing waves. The land bridge shatters, isolating the peaks as solitary islands. The great coastal plain becomes the silent, crushing abyss we know today. The silence of the drowned world is absolute and deeply final. This is the true horror of geological deep time. It renders all human ambition completely pathetic. We carve our names into stone, believing we can cheat the void. But the planet operates on a scale so vast and indifferent that it can wipe out a continent just by changing the temperature a few degrees. The sediment cores resting in this freezing vault are not just dirt. They are the pulverized remains of a forgotten epoch, a harsh reminder of our own incredible fragility in the cosmos. The digital waters on the monitor settle at their modern current levels. The Yonaguni monument is once again buried under 82 feet of the violent Kuroshio current. The ocean has hidden the evidence, locking the truth behind a wall of crushing atmospheric pressure. We know the exact timeline of the drowning. We know the brutal mechanics of the flooding. But knowing how the world sank does not answer the fundamental, lingering question written in the submerged and silent bedrock. I stare at the blinking cursor on the simulation terminal. The water explains the preservation, but it does not explain the geometry. The perfect, right-angled terraces still exist in the dark. If we accept that this landscape was exposed to the air before the Great Melt, we must ask what forces were operating on that rock. We have to look away from the water and stare directly into the violent, terrifying tectonic engine of the planet itself. The stone has another dark story to tell. The water rising over that ancient land bridge was merely the surface symptom of a much deeper, darker violence. We are captivated by the drowning of a continent, but we forget the violent engine operating far below the crust. To truly understand the geometry resting in the abyss, we must look away from the ocean and stare directly into the subterranean grinder of the planet itself. The Earth is not a passive canvas. It is a restless, mechanical beast. Inside the sterile white glow of the laboratory, the archaeoseismologist watches a hydraulic press descend upon a thick slab of layered sandstone. The machine hums with cold indifference, applying thousands of pounds of pressure per square inch. There is no human malice here, only raw, unthinking physics. You can hear the rock begin to sing, a low, terrifying groan of structural failure right before the inevitable shattering. Suddenly, the stone snaps. It does not crumble into random dust, but cleanly fractures along perfectly parallel lines, leaving a sheer, right-angled edge. Looking at this flawless geometry born of pure violence, a chilling question emerges from the debris. Are those submerged monoliths the deliberate work of ancient master masons? Or is Yonaguni simply the greatest, most terrifying optical illusion ever created by the planet itself? We desperately want to see intention in those 90-degree angles. But the archaeoseismologist sees the merciless law of parallel jointing. This is a natural geological phenomenon where sedimentary rock, pushed beyond its breaking point, fractures under immense tectonic stress. The planet does not carve with a chisel. It sculpts through planetary trauma, cleaving massive layers of sediment with a mathematical precision that mocks our finest architecture. Think of the energy required to snap bedrock. It is a slow, agonizing process of tension building over millennia, a silent war fought in the absolute dark beneath our feet. When the stone finally yields, it releases a kinetic shockwave that can shatter mountains. The perfectly straight lines we marvel at underwater are essentially the fossilized scars of ancient agony, the exact mathematical coordinates where the Earth's crust simply gave up. This geometric tragedy is born from a specific geography of doom. Yonaguni sits directly within a highly volatile earthquake zone along the Ryukyu Trench. Here, in the crushing depths, the immense Philippine sea plate is violently subducting, diving relentlessly beneath the Eurasian plate. It is a slow-motion collision of continental masses, grinding rock against rock in an endless cycle of creation and annihilation that dwarfs human history. Through the eyes of the geologist, this subduction zone is a factory of destruction. The ocean floor is being dragged down into the mantle to be melted and reborn. The sheer friction of this planetary descent contorts the sandstone above, stretching it until it shatters into those impossibly straight lines. We are looking at the architectural byproduct of continents being slowly digested by the molten heart of the Earth. But the illusion of a pyramid requires more than just straight cracks. It requires the appearance of deliberate, ascending staircases. The archaeoseismologist points to the stratigraphic layers in the crushed sample. The rock is a towering cake of varying densities. When the ocean currents wash away the softer, underlying mudstone, they leave the harder sandstone suspended without support, waiting for gravity to pull the trigger. Stripped of its foundation, the structural integrity of the cliff face collapses. Massive rectangular blocks of the harder sandstone shear off along those pre-existing parallel joints. They break away and slide down into the freezing abyss, leaving behind sharp, stepped terraces that look exactly like an ancient amphitheater. The Earth is constantly shedding its skin, carving phantom staircases out of pure, unthinking entropy. These steps were never meant to be walked upon by human feet, or any feet at all. They are the terrifying architecture of gravity and erosion. Every perfect terrace is merely the negative space left behind by a colossal rockfall. We stare into the ocean and see a sunken temple, completely blind to the fact that we are actually admiring the freshly broken edge of a tectonic fault line, a monument to the planet's blind, mechanical fury. It is a profound existential shock to realize that nature does not need our geometry. We are so desperately arrogant, so completely convinced that only a rational mind can create a straight line. Yet here, in the cold and crushing dark of the Pacific, the Earth demonstrates that it can manufacture our most sacred architectural shapes simply by crushing mud and sand together for 20 million years and then tearing it all apart. The hydraulic press in the laboratory finally powers down, leaving behind a pile of perfectly squared rubble. The archaeoseismologist carefully picks up a fractured piece, tracing its flawlessly smooth, right-angled edge. There is no comfort in this stone, only the cold realization of our own insignificance. If the blind grinding of tectonic plates can perfectly mimic the apex of human engineering, what exactly makes us special? We are left alone with a deeply unsettling truth. The geometry of the abyss is not a message left by a forgotten golden age, but a mirror reflecting our own desperate desire for meaning in a chaotic universe. As we drift further along this sunken fault line, we must confront the darkest trick our minds can play. We are about to discover how easily our own biology betrays us when we stare into the void, searching for ghosts in the stone. We stare into the abyss, searching for ghosts in the stone, exactly as our biology dictates. On the left side of the screen, the flawless interlocking masonry of an ancient Incan wall in Peru stands as a testament to human will. On the right, the shattered, right-angled terraces of the Yonaguni monument loom in the dark water. I place them side by side to show you the ultimate optical illusion. The two images blur together, and our minds immediately weave a narrative of a lost empire. We are entirely biologically programmed to see faces in the drifting clouds and magnificent castles in the shattered stone. It is the greatest strength of our species, and simultaneously, our most terrifying, deep-seated flaw. When confronted with the cold, meaningless mechanics of tectonic fracturing, our consciousness rebels. We desperately impose order upon the chaos of the ocean, attempting to tame the crushing indifference of nature with the comforting myth of a sunken civilization. This phenomenon is not magic. It is a neurological glitch known as pareidolia. Deep within your brain, the fusiform face area is an ancient evolutionary survival mechanism. It was forged in the tall grass of the Pleistocene epoch, forcing early humans to recognize patterns instantly, even when they do not actually exist. It is better to mistake a shadow for a predator and run than to miss the predator and die. We are prisoners of this ancient survival software, projecting meaning onto dust. Now we drag that same Paleolithic brain down into the freezing depths of the Pacific Ocean. We look at the sheer, mechanically sheared rock of Yonaguni, and our overactive neurology begins to stitch together a phantom metropolis. It is a mass hallucination born of existential dread. We are so terrified of an empty, mindless universe that we would rather invent drowned gods and prehistoric architects than accept that the Earth can carve perfect geometry by pure, unthinking accident. The desperate search for a human fingerprint in the abyss drives researchers to hunt for any anomaly. Some divers claim to have found the undeniable proof of intelligent design: ancient tool marks and perfectly circular star holes bored deep into the flat stone terraces. To the desperate observer, these look exactly like the quarry marks of a sophisticated Paleolithic masonry guild, preparing to split the bedrock and build a monument to outlast the creeping, inevitable ice age. But the abyss answers our arrogance with a profound, almost mocking silence. Marine biologists have analyzed these supposedly sacred drill sites and delivered a crushing reality. These holes are not the work of ancient engineers wielding bronze or stone tools. They are the exact size, depth, and shape of the burrows carved by the Pacific rock-boring sea urchin, a mindless invertebrate, acting on blind, biological instinct, slowly scraping away the stone in the dark over thousands of years. There is a unique poetic horror in this revelation. Biology is mocking our highest aspirations. A creature without a brain, seeking only shelter from the relentless ocean current, leaves a transient mark in the sandstone that we elevate to the level of divine, tragic architecture. The ocean does not care about our desperate need for a grand historical narrative. It simply grinds away, using the humblest of creatures to inadvertently mimic the proudest achievements of human civilization. Yet the human mind refuses to surrender to the void. The ultimate illusion, championed by fringe theorists, is the whispered rumor of a Star of David engraving discovered on a submerged, flat platform. When we hear this, we want to believe. We want to grasp at this familiar, sacred geometry in the crushing dark, hoping it proves that we were here, that we mattered, that our symbols can somehow survive the absolute devastation of geological time and the rising waters of the apocalypse. The truth of this sacred engraving is far more violent and entirely mindless. Geologists subjected the symbol to rigorous analysis, proving it is nothing more than natural scraping. When violent typhoons tear across the surface of the Pacific, they drag smaller, jagged rocks back and forth across the monument's plateau. The storm itself, a chaotic vortex of wind and water, blindly scratched those intersecting lines into the stone. The planet is the only artist working in this dark studio. We are faced with a universe that produces exquisite geometry by sheer accident and then erases it with a passing storm. The Yonaguni monument is not a message from our ancestors. It is a brutal, unfeeling mirror reflecting our own ultimate fragility. We are pattern-seeking animals trapped in a cosmic void, projecting our fleeting existence onto a canvas of eternal stone and water. The illusion is shattering, leaving us alone with the terrifying, majestic scale of the natural world. If this terrifying scale of geological time and the dismantling of our deepest illusions shakes your understanding of human history, hit the like button right now. To make sure you do not miss the final resolution to this oceanic mystery, subscribe to the channel. And I want you to tell me down in the comments, knowing how easily our brains deceive us, do you still see the ghost of an ancient empire in these drowned stones? Or just the cold, beautiful indifference of the planet? Let us look back at the split screen. The ancient Incan masonry required an entire empire, thousands of hands, and a shared, desperate belief in eternity to move the mountains. The Yonaguni monument required absolutely none of that. It required only 20 million years of tectonic pressure, the relentless carving of the Kuroshio current, and the slow, grinding death of a tectonic plate. It forces us to realize that the Earth builds its own ruined temples without shedding a single tear. We are leaving the realm of archaeology and entering the domain of pure existential poetry. The monument is a massive geological Rorschach test, sitting quietly in the twilight zone of the ocean. We are so profoundly terrified of the dark, and so frightened of our own temporary nature, that we populate the abyss with imaginary kings, rather than face the cold, empty truth. The stone is lying to us, but only because we are begging it to tell us a story where we are eternal protagonists. The stone may be lying to us, but the water speaks a terrifying truth. Above the surface, the typhoon that dragged those scraping rocks across the plateau is only a temporary manifestation of the planet's wrath. Down here, in the absolute dark, a far more insidious and eternal process is unfolding. We are descending back into the nocturnal abyss, where the true master of this domain works without rest. Through the viewport of the submersible, the marine stratigrapher watches the violent ballet of the deep. The storm raging above sends heavy swells crashing against the coastal cliffs, but 82 feet below, the monument is subjected to a relentless, invisible force. The water here is not a passive medium. It is a hungry, fluid entity, stripping away the illusion of permanence, one microscopic layer at a time. We look at sunken ruins and comfort ourselves with the romantic notion that the deep sea is a quiet vault holding human history in stasis. But the ocean is not a museum for our forgotten empires. It is an active, violent eraser. It does not preserve. It digests. Everything that enters this watery oblivion is destined to be unmade, ground down into the eternal dust of the seabed. To understand the fate of all things submerged, you must abandon the idea of standing still. In this liquid cosmos, stillness is a myth. The water itself is a massive planetary engine driven by temperature and rotation, carrying an unimaginable weight of kinetic energy. And that energy has a singular, terrifying purpose: to flatten, to smooth, and to obliterate any anomaly. The primary weapon of this oceanic erasure is the very river of water we are diving through. The Kuroshio current is one of the most powerful forces on the planet, an endless ribbon of dark water sweeping northward past the Ryukyu arc. It does not merely flow past the Yonaguni monument, it assaults it. The stratigrapher listens to the roar of the current, vibrating through the titanium hull, a sound like a cosmic wind. This subterranean river flows at speeds up to 4.5 miles per hour. That number might seem small on land, but underwater, water is 800 times denser than air. This current acts as a continuous, high-pressure liquid abrasive against the ancient sandstone. It is a planetary sandblaster, hurling millions of suspended silica particles and microscopic debris against the face of the rock, second after second. The sheer mechanical violence of this flow is impossible to fully comprehend. If a human civilization had dared to build a temple here, the Kuroshio current would have ripped the mortar from its joints and shattered its columns long ago. The monument survives only because it is a massive, unified extrusion of the earth itself, and even so, it is losing the war. The water is slowly flaying the stone alive. But the physical violence of the current is only the first phase of the ocean's digestion. The water also brings life, and in this eternal dark, life is a slow, creeping rot. The stratigrapher zooms the exterior cameras onto the sheer 90-degree face of the terrace. The stone is not bare. It is suffocated beneath a living crust, a microscopic forest of hunger that eats the very architecture of the seabed. Colonies of coralline algae and deep-sea sponges attach themselves to the porous surface of the rock. These organisms are not merely resting on the monument, they are actively dissolving it. They secrete powerful chemical acids that slowly break down the mineral matrix of the sandstone in a relentless process known as bioerosion. The ocean uses biology as a solvent. It is a terrifying realization that the architecture of this monolith is being consumed by the very ecosystem it supports. The biology of the reef is literally feeding on the geology of the island. Every perfect corner, every seemingly intentional staircase, is being chewed away by millions of microscopic mouths. The abyss leaves nothing untouched, transforming solid bedrock into a dissolving slurry of calcium and sand. When we measure this dual assault of mechanical current and biological acid, the timeline of the monument collapses. Oceanographic data confirms that every single century, the Yonaguni monument loses a fraction of an inch of its entire surface area. In the vast calendar of geological deep time, this is a shockingly rapid rate of decay. The monolith is bleeding its mass directly into the vastness of the Pacific. This means the sharp lines and perfect right angles we see today, the very geometries that trick our brains into seeing ancient human masonry, are not ancient at all. They are constantly being renewed, sheared away, and reshaped by the sea itself. The monument we're looking at today is not the exact same monument that stood here 1,000 years ago. It is an evolving sculpture, actively carved by the indifference of the water.
We are witnessing a cosmic tragedy played out in extreme slow motion. The Earth fractured this stone into perfect geometry, and now the ocean is ruthlessly scrubbing that geometry from existence. The Yonaguni monument is a dying ghost, trapped in a liquid purgatory. It reminds us that no matter how monumental the architecture, the abyss will eventually reclaim it all in a silent, watery grave. The ocean is a perfect solvent, erasing the grandest stone geometries, yet, paradoxically, human history often survives in the most fragile of vessels. I watched the archaeoseismologist walk through a pristine museum in Tokyo, surrounded by the delicate, swirling clay of ancient Jomon pottery. These fired earthen bowls, thin as eggshells, have survived millennia of typhoons and earthquakes. They are the undeniable fingerprints of our ancestors, preserved against all odds. The scientist's gaze drifts from these intricate artifacts to a high-resolution photograph of the Yonaguni seabed, a bleak and empty patch of underwater sand. If we are to believe that a lost civilization carved that submerged ziggurat, we must confront a deafening silence. We are searching for ghosts in the abyss, looking for the echoes of a society that supposedly mastered bedrock, but left absolutely nothing else behind. This brings us to the ultimate, terrifying paradox of the deep. A sprawling megalith implies an empire, and empires are messy. They bleed debris into the earth. If an advanced civilization built this colossal monolith, where are their broken cups? Where are their fire pits, their discarded tools, their dead? The sheer absence of this ordinary debris is louder than any tectonic fracture. It is an archaeological void that haunts scholars. For decades, the most determined divers and marine archaeologists have scoured the immediate vicinity of the Yonaguni structure. They have sifted through the shifting sands and probed the deep crevices, desperate for a single piece of proof. Yet, not one undisputed human artifact has ever been recovered from this site. No shards of pottery, no fractured stone blades, no rusted weapons of bronze or iron. Just the indifferent, empty ocean floor. In any genuine ruin, from the sunken docks of Alexandria to the submerged caves of the Yucatan, human existence leaves a stain. We are creatures of waste, constantly dropping fragments of our lives into the mud. But the waters surrounding this monolith are clinically, impossibly sterile. The archaeoseismologist stares at the core samples, realizing that the complete lack of human detritus points to a chilling truth about our own desire to create myths. We must look at what the fossil record actually permits. The oldest confirmed human habitation on the Ryukyu Islands dates back roughly 32,000 years. We have found their scattered remains, the quiet, humble traces of Paleolithic humanity clinging to survival on the edge of the Pacific. But these were nomadic hunter-gatherers following the seasonal migrations of prey. They were survivors huddled around campfires, not megalith-building engineers. To assume these small, isolated bands of Paleolithic wanderers suddenly carved a mountain of lower Miocene sandstone into perfect geometric terraces is a profound leap of faith. It requires us to project our modern obsession with monumental architecture onto people whose primary concern was surviving the brutal freeze of the Pleistocene epoch. They did not conquer the stone. They merely existed in its shadow, entirely at the mercy of the elements. The cold mechanics of civilization dictate a merciless law.
To build a structure of this staggering scale requires the agricultural surplus of tens of thousands of people. You need armies of laborers, logistics, supply chains, and vast fields of crops to feed them. Yet, the archaeoseismologist finds the ultimate negation in the laboratory. Deep sediment cores extracted from the surrounding seabed show absolutely no trace of prehistoric agriculture in the region. There is no ancient pollen from cultivated grain, no charcoal layer from massive land-clearing fires, no chemical signature of a dense, concentrated population. The microscopic strata of the earth simply refuse to lie. The soil holds no memory of a vast, disciplined workforce. It only remembers the rhythmic deposition of wild flora and the slow, grinding advance of the sea. We are left with a monument that mathematically could not have been supported by the local ecology. This is the intellectual horror we must face. We want the Yonaguni monument to be ours. We desperately want to claim its majestic 90-degree angles as a triumph of early human will over the chaotic abyss. But the total absence of a biological and cultural footprint suggests something far more isolating. It proves that the Earth is perfectly capable of mimicking our greatest architectural achievements by pure, blind chance, without needing us at all. The empty sand beside the monolith is not missing a civilization. It is simply empty. The archaeoseismologist turns away from the pristine Jomon pottery, burdened by the realization of our cosmic insignificance. If nature can sculpt a drowned city entirely on its own, then our grandest creations are nothing special. We are but a fleeting spark in the dark, and when we are gone, the ocean and the shifting tectonic plates will easily sculpt new empires of empty stone. This empty stone is not merely a graveyard of a civilization that never was. It is a mirror, reflecting the fragile vanity of the one we currently inhabit. You look at the absolute absence of tools, the lack of pottery, the void of human memory in the crushing abyss of Yonaguni, and you feel safe. But that safety is an illusion born of a tragically short attention span and immense arrogance. Look away from the Pacific Trench and cast your gaze upon the crowning achievements of our own fleeting epoch. I watch the sweeping skyline of modern Tokyo, the geometric dominance of New York, the sun-drenched sprawl of Miami. We pour our souls into steel and glass, cementing our legacy into the bedrock, convinced that our towering metropolises are immune to the grinding wheel of deep time. We stand on the precipice of the Anthropocene, blind to the fact that the Earth has already written our epitaph in the drowned terraces off the Japanese coast. Yonaguni is not a whispered message from the ancient past, begging to be deciphered. It is a terrifying, inescapable prophecy for our immediate future. The ocean simply does not care about our economic output or technological brilliance. The mechanism of our erasure is already in motion, driven by the very atmosphere we have thoughtlessly altered. Current climate models do not speak in the language of possibilities. They speak in the cold, unforgiving mathematics of thermodynamics. If the Greenland ice sheet crosses the thermal tipping point and melts entirely, the global ocean will inevitably rise by 24 feet. This is not a distant, abstract hypothesis debated in the sterile halls of academia. A 24-foot rise is an absolute death sentence for the coastal geography as you know it, an apocalyptic flood that will mercilessly submerge the homes of over 600 million people. Entire nations, sprawling financial hubs, and centuries of cultural heritage will vanish beneath a dark, crushing tide. In the digital simulation running before my eyes, the timeline accelerates,
stripping away the illusion of our permanence. The dark waters rush in, swallowing the grand avenues and the monuments, plunging the vibrant chaos of human existence into a sudden, suffocating silence. The immediate tragedy of displacement fades into the yawning abyss of eternity, leaving only the skeletons of our cities. You might instinctively believe that our towering skyscrapers will stand as defiant tombs in the deep. But the ocean is a relentless, highly acidic consumer. In a mere 10,000 years, a literal blink of an eye in the geological calendar, the reinforced concrete of our modern architecture will have completely dissolved in the corrosive salt water. The glass will be pulverized into mere sand. What remains of our absolute dominance will be humiliatingly sparse. Once the ocean has devoured the artificial facades and digested the steel rebar, only the sheer, right-angled foundations of bedrock will survive the planetary sandblaster. We will be reduced to naked geometry, a series of parallel lines and stepped terraces resting in the crushing darkness, identical to the anomaly of Yonaguni. The digital archives, the massive cloud servers, the entire sum of our recorded history, all of it requires a fragile infrastructure that will short-circuit and rot the moment the waters claim the server rooms. Just as we found no pottery or grain in the sediments of the Ryukyu Arc, the ocean will scrub our digital footprint clean. We will be ghosts haunting an architectural void, lacking context. Fast forward the simulation to a distant, unwritten epoch, long after our names have evaporated from the cosmic record. Future explorers, whether they are a new iteration of humanity recovering from the evolutionary bottleneck, or an entirely different intelligence, will send their own submersibles into the silent depths. Their sonar will ping against the submerged grid of Manhattan. They will stare at their glowing screens, mesmerized by the perfect grid system, the artificial right angles, and the unnatural spacing of the deep foundations. And just as we do today off the coast of Japan, they will fall into a bitter, desperate debate. They will look at the ruins of Wall Street and wonder if these sheer drops were carved by blind tectonic forces or by forgotten gods. They will project their own cultural myths onto the geometry of our decay. Their fusiform face areas will trace imaginary deities in the eroded remnants of our subway tunnels. They will search for meaning in the barren, underwater grid, entirely unaware that the builders were just panicked apes who poisoned their own atmosphere and drowned in their own hubris. Time is a merciless circle. This is the ultimate, paralyzing horror of the deep. The realization that our entire civilization is just a temporary anomaly, waiting to be corrected by the shifting plates and the rising tides. We are writing our grand legacy in water, building castles on a tectonic fault line, foolishly believing that the universe will mourn our passing. The abyss does not remember, and the stone does not weep. The stone does not weep, and as I watch the submersible's halogen lights flicker and die, the darkness of the Pacific instantly reclaims its territory. The drone ascends, leaving the sheer, brutalist terraces of Yonaguni behind in the freezing gloom. Down there, 82 feet below the churning Kuroshio current, the monument vanishes into an eternal, lightless void, utterly indifferent to our frantic, desperate search for human meaning. We began this descent searching for our own reflection, hoping to find the fingerprints of forgotten ancestors carved into the lower Miocene sandstone. But this submerged monolith is nothing more than a massive geological Rorschach test for our collective ego. We stare into the random, violent shearing of tectonic plates, and our brains frantically stitch together the illusion of walls, streets, and sunken empires to ward off the terrifying silence of the deep. You must understand that the true horror of Yonaguni is not that a Paleolithic civilization was swallowed by meltwater pulse 1A. The true, paralyzing revelation is that the Earth does not need us to build architecture more magnificent than our greatest cathedrals. It can fracture mountains into perfect 90-degree angles completely by accident, using nothing but the crushing hydraulic weight of the ocean and the slow grind of the Philippine Sea Plate. When you look out across the cold, restless surface of the ocean, you are looking at the great eraser of history. We are a species obsessed with permanence, desperately trying to anchor ourselves to a planet that is constantly repaving its own surface. From the bioerosion of marine algae to the tectonic subduction of the Ryukyu Trench, the world is a relentless machine, and we are merely a fleeting chemical reaction clinging to its outermost shell. In the end, it truly does not matter whose hand shaped those massive geometric slabs. Whether carved by prehistoric masons striving against the dying of the Ice Age, or fractured by the blind, mindless physics of the Earth, the final equation remains exactly the same. The ocean reclaims absolutely everything. The water is a patient predator, dissolving our illusions of mastery fraction of an inch by fraction of an inch, century after century. I find a strange, melancholic freedom in this realization. We carry the colossal burden of legacy, the exhausting mandate to be remembered by the cosmos. But the dark, silent terraces of Yonaguni whisper a different truth. They tell us that we are absolved of this impossible weight. Our existence is a fragile, beautiful spark in the long night of deep time, and the inevitable return to the silence of the sea is not a failure, but a quiet homecoming. We are temporary tenants on this restless crust, and perhaps our only true triumph is the courage to look into that abyss and understand our place within it. If this journey into the dark has shattered your comforting illusions and given you a new, profound perspective on our cosmic fragility, hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel, not merely to follow a series, but to join me as we continue to tear away the comforting lies of our reality. Look again at the waves breaking over the Ryukyu Arc. Beneath them lies a monument to the beautiful, terrifying certainty of our own erasure. The currents will continue to sandblast the stone long after the last human voice fades from the earth. The geometry will sharpen, then dull, then collapse into the trench, feeding the endless cycle of the lithosphere. The planet will simply keep turning, an indifferent tomb spinning through a cold and silent void. The sea holds no memory, and the stone keeps no promises. Embrace the fleeting beauty of your existence, for it is the only true monument you will ever possess. Let the waters rise, let the tectonic plates shift, and let the long, dark tide of time wash over our desperate monuments. We are but stardust and sea foam, returning to the vast, uncaring dark. Until we meet again in the shadows of the past, this is the end of the line. Signing off.